In this week's episode, I talk with Lawrence Johns about his story and his deep dive into the world of personal development. We look at how our purpose comes from our wounds, our personal struggles, and how taking responsibility for our actions, decisions, and their consequences can change our lives. Welcome to Man Quest Define Meaning, where we help men navigate modern life, find their true purpose, and redefine manhood. I'm your host, James, and each week, inspiring guests share their journeys of overcoming fear, embracing vulnerability, and finding success. From experts to everyday heroes, get practical advice and powerful insights. Struggling with career, relationships, or personal growth? We've got you covered. Join us on Man Quest Define Meaning. Now, let's dive in. Good morning, everybody. My name is James. I'm the host of Man A Quest Define Meaning. And today, I have a very special guest, Lawrence Johns. How you doing, Lawrence?
I'm pretty good. I'm very well.
So let's jump straight in. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Lawrence Johns. I describe myself as a men's personal development professional because I can't really think of a better term than that, really. I've been involved in men's personal development, specifically men's personal development, for over 2 decades now. I'm currently the outreach director for the Mankind Project UK and Ireland, as well as running my own podcasts, etc., called Doing the Work. So I'm really dedicated to simplifying and demystifying men's personal development. That's my personal mission.
Can you tell us, because I know you've got quite a special story, can you tell us where you began and what got you through that time in your life?
Yeah, it's interesting for me to think about where my journey into men's personal development work started. I guess it started when I was a kid. I was raised in the East End of London, and way before it was gentrified to what it is now. I'm showing my age, but once it wasn't as she as it is now. And my dad was a gangster in that area, basically. And so from a very early age, I had to find tools to thrive in a very masculine environment. That world is very much around hierarchy. It's based on hierarchy. And the further you are at the top, the safer you are. And the further down, the more dangerous and intolerable your life becomes. So everything becomes curated. Everything becomes an attack, a defense, or a microaggression. Even jokes are about jostling for position. Can I push it a little bit further? Did he take it a little bit too far? So very early on, I learned how to read men. I learned how to assert control and manipulate men, and also saw when I was being manipulated by men. So in a way, I'd been involved in working with masculinity to survive as a child. And I'll talk later on, I think, about how we create strategies that then become successful for us or unsuccessful for us in our lives later. So I learned to thrive in that world. I learned to thrive in that world. I would have been what you'd have considered sort of one of the top boys in a way. I was popular with other guys. If I weren't popular by those guys, I was tolerated or feared, which was just as good. Popular with the girls, and survived and thrived in that environment. Eventually moved away from that environment slightly and moved into a more professional world. And those tools still, I didn't go into crime. I was petrified of the pure, I tell you what, this is a ridiculous story, but I've been sharing it with a lot of men my age. And I reckon I'd have gone to prison if it wasn't for the film Scum. Right. I watched it at a time when I was far too young to really be watching those films, but it was a time of video recorders coming into the house. So suddenly we got the thing. It petrified me. And I think I probably would have been a criminal if it hadn't been for seeing Scum and just being petrified of going to prison. So anyway, I found different routes, and that became fairly successful in what I'd done. But always the cracks were showing because I was always playing a part. Everything was curated. Everything was a thought ahead, and it was exhausting. And when I got to about 27, 28, the cracks were starting to show in many ways. And I was making good money. I was a director of a really cool bookshop in London. It was all going great, but I was spiraling into alcoholism and drug addiction. And luckily for me, my boss at the time was involved in the Mankind Project. And he came in, he could see that I was messing up. He took me to one side and he said, listen, there's this weekend I think you should go on. And I really felt like, looks a bit weird, but like, it's better than being fired. So I'll go off and go and do it. And I went and done this weekend, what's called the New Warrior Training Adventure, 3-day experiential men's retreat, really. And it was a situation that changed my life. There's a moment before you go in where a man says to you, if you go through this door, your life as a man may never be the same. And I thought, yeah, whatever, a bit of theatrics, good. I went in and my life wasn't the same when I came out. And it wasn't because like somehow I'd been reprogrammed or any of that stuff. I was all still there. But what changed for me was I saw a situation on that weekend where there was men I could see and respected as strong and clever and able and funny and popular and all of that stuff, but not using it to attack other men and not using it to put themselves above other men. I saw men being respected for vulnerability. I saw men being respected for authenticity and honesty. And that was mind-blowing for me. That was something I'd never experienced before, was that level of sort of relaxation in masculinity. It wasn't a game. It wasn't a competition to be played. It was men together and I felt safe. And I didn't feel like I was in competition with anyone. In fact, the opposite. I felt like I was there to support and be supported. And that was a radical change for me. And I came out, and from then on, really, I've always been involved in men's personal development. Apart from I had a kind of real life crisis in 2009 when my business collapsed, the economics collapsed. And I retreated from it, really, and went back into alcoholism, drug addiction, and for a while. And what I noticed was those men that I'd met in my I group, what we call our men's groups, kept showing up and kept going, Lawrence, this ain't right. You're not in a good place. This ain't happening. This ain't working. And so eventually when I hit rock bottom, it was the first place I returned to. And they were waiting for me. And that, again, that just reaffirmed, actually, there is something real here for me. There is a real community here, and I can really rely on men, even when I'm at my lowest, rather than what I'd always believed was men only wanted me when I was at my highest. And so since that day, really, it's been what I do. And that's why I say my mission is to simplify and demystify men's personal development, because I'm not from a background where you'd normally find your way into men's personal development or even personal development. And so I think there's a large gap in how we reach those men, more men like that. And that's my mission, is to reach more men like me and to break things down in a way so it's simple and inviting.
So men who do the work and men who don't, what is that big gap that needs to be overcome?
So you mean what fills the gap, or what? So let me look at it two ways. I think what creates that gap is, I think there's a couple of things. One, I think men's personal development suffers from a bit of a branding issue, really. You do a cursory look and it's all swords and wizards, or it's men, very vanilla men sitting in circles with each other, looking a little bit sad, if I'm honest. And that just wouldn't have attracted me. I just wouldn't have looked at that and found that appealing. So there's a branding issue. And also I think there's a problem with, I can get over inflated with this stuff, right? So I project that on a lot of on other things that I see, where it's presented as over intellectualized or overly academic and hard to understand. And I think it's a way of self-justifying. Look how clever I am that I understand this stuff, right? But that's not helpful when you're trying to get in. You want simple tools and simple strategies that I could use today. So there's a branding issue. There's the over intellectualization. Then there's price wars to a lot of this stuff. It can be expensive, especially when you're on one side of it. It's like most of these things. The Mankind Project, I think we currently charge like £750 for our NWTA. And when you're going on it, that can seem expensive. Once you've done it and you see the mechanics of it and you see all what's behind it, you think they're running at a loss, which we are. We've been successfully losing money for 40 years. And I joke slightly, but we break even. It can be prohibitive. So that's what creates the gap, I think. And what's in that gap between the men that don't do work and the men that do work is beliefs, really. Beliefs that I think a lot of men, before they do work, believe on their own. They believe they wait for life to begin somehow. Like, really? There's no threshold. When I was a boy and now I'm this guy, what am I supposed to be doing? And taking responsibility for our own lives and cleaning up our side of the street. Also, service is missing. So there's lots of elements, I think, that make up successful men's personal development. Connection to other men, kind of peer facilitation, service, being held accountable, and having a clear idea of purpose that is bigger than self. So community. I think they're the elements that is different between people that have done the work and people who are doing the work and people who are yet to do the work or to start that journey.
I know from personal experience, I've been on this journey for about 8 years now. I've done the MKP Warrior Weekend. And what I noticed when I first got onto the journey was that as soon as you stepped in, there's so much stuff out there, it's almost quite overwhelming. Yeah. And you get to the point where you try something and then you're bouncing onto another thing, or you're reading all these books. And then once you finish one book, you're on to the next book and the next book. And you're not really taking anything in. For those people who perhaps aren't on the path yet or are just started, what would you suggest that they do?
It's a really difficult one, actually, because it's like anything. There are, in my opinion, varying levels of effectiveness and competence of the people that are out there and of the organizations that are out there. And I don't want to get into this thing of competition because that would be ridiculously small to start doing that and having competition between the ones. I think I hope we all find a way of being together, all of these organizations, actually, because all the good ones offer something different. So it's not they're in competition for each other. It's like there's certain flavors for the certain man that you are and the things that fit you. And that's the way it should be. But finding your way into that and finding your way into the one that suits you, as you're saying, is really difficult because there is so much out there. What I would suggest is really take your time, right? You're going to be doing the work for a long time. If you're in the state where it's so bad that you're in some kind of crisis or you need change straight away, the problem with that is then you can do what I call bouncing. You just start bouncing from idea to idea to philosophy, from program to program, from book to book. And the first thing you can do is just stop that bounce, because there's some effective things that you can do that you don't need anyone to tell you, which is take control of your sleep, take control of getting regular exercise. Don't get involved in anything new for a little while. Find as much time as you can for yourself and just settle down a little bit and realize it's going to be a journey. And then just start reaching out to organizations and looking at them and reading a bit here and there. Start to find a flavor of what suits you and find a men's group first and foremost. I don't care whose one it is. The Mankind Project, we run ones free. They're online. They don't cost anything to go to. They run 4 times a week. And there's other organizations that don't do that. So I'm not saying just come to us, but get into a men's group, get support first. And you'll find men there who have ideas about what might be good for you. But just take a little time like you would any expensive purchase. that bit of advice they give you, like if it's over £1,000, wait 30 days. Like, it's not bad advice of start looking, just take a little bit of time and see what's right for you. And the people that make the boldest claims, question them the most, because the fundamentals of what we do is quite simple, really. I think it's bringing men together in a different way and creating a space where men can explore what's right for them and using simple tools to move our lives forward. So yeah, take your time, do some research into the organizations, find a way you can get some interaction with the different organizations and see which one you trust.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier about strategies.
I just want to go back to that 1 second, because the most important thing is when you are vulnerable, that's when addiction can kick in. And there is definitely like workshop junkies. You see them, they turn up at everything. They're there, right? And they're reading every single book and all of that. And if you're doing a deep dive, that's great, but question your motives. Because if you're always thinking the next one will make me perfect, the next one will make me perfect, that's addictive behavior, right? You are what you are. You're good enough right now. You just need something to help you bring that out. So this thing ain't going to perfect you, and it's not going to solve all your problems. It's going to give you some tools so you can do the work. So it's okay to take your time and do watch if you get caught on that cartwheel, because you can spend a lot of time, you can spend a lot of money, and just like any other addiction.
Yeah, nice. You mentioned earlier about strategy, the strategies that you took that helped you successfully, but also helped you unsuccessfully. Can you go into a bit more detail about those?
Yeah, this is the way that I've tried to simplify the idea of men's personal development is, I think there's the man we are and there's the man we could be. And the only thing blocking the way between the two is the man we had to become. And what I mean by that is, Tillman has a great quote where he says, for love and affection, we bend ourselves into so many different shapes that one day we look up and we don't even know what shape we could have been. And I think that's what happens. We move through our life and we're going on one road, and traumatic experiences happen. And when I talk about trauma, I'm not necessarily talking about the massive things, although it can be those things like abuse and death and loved ones and all that stuff. The definition of trauma I use is any event where I wasn't physically, intellectually, emotionally, or spiritually equipped to deal with it. So what happens is we're going through our life and we get these events. It can be being lost in a supermarket or lost on the beach, or it could be you bullied at school or you got some abuse. But these things happen throughout our life. And in that moment, we have the best problem-solving machine in the world between our ears. Currently, touch wood, it remains that way. And it wants the world to make sense so that we can survive and thrive. It's a problem-solving machine. So when we hit these traumas, these traumatic events, we have to find a way for it to make sense. So we take on a certain belief about us. We take on a certain belief about the world. And based on that, we make up a strategy, right? So say I was bullied at school. Suddenly my world don't make sense anymore. I've been nice to everyone. Everyone's been nice to me. It's been really friendly. I go to the first day of school, 6 boys decide, we don't like you. We're going to make your life a misery. And I don't know why. So I go, why? My brain might go, you must be weak, right? So I think, oh, I'll take that on as a belief. What do I believe about the world? It's a dangerous place. All right, so I have a problem now. I'm weak. The world's a dangerous place. So the brain has to come up with a strategy in that moment. And that strategy might be, next time I'm coming in, I'm so big, no one's ever going to mess with me again. No one's going to do that to me again. Or it might be, no one's going to see me again. I'm just going to go so small and invisible, no one's going to see me because the world's dangerous. That strategy then goes in deep. We take that in as the truth, right? Because it's a survival. So we take it as truth. And that's what I think Carl Jung is talking about when he talks about shadow. When he says shadow, the parts of ourselves we hide, repress, and deny. I think he's talking about strategies that we've built for survival. Now, the problem with those strategies is because the world needs to make sense, for that strategy to be true and work, the world has to be a certain way. So we put a filter over our world so that we see that truth. It's called a schema. It's if you think of the color red, all you'll see is the color red. If you think the world is a dangerous place, you will see danger everywhere it is. If you think it's a safe place, you will see more safety and more trust. So these strategies, as Aeneas Nin says, it's not, the world is not, it is. I do not see the world as it is. I see the world as I am. So once we have these strategies, that colors our reality. So this idea of the man we are, the man we want to be, and the man we had to become, that's what I'm talking about. Those strategies we've created to survive, there comes a point in our life, usually around middle age, where we get there and we're survivors, right? If we got here, we survived. Lots of us didn't make it, let's be honest. So if we get here and we've survived, those strategies have worked, but they may not be serving us now. And we may, as Tillman said, we might not be in the shape we wanted to be. So when we say doing the work or new to the work, I think what we're talking about is trying to get enough insight and support to be able to bend ourselves, to take the strategies that work and work with the strategies that don't, and try and bend ourselves into the shape of man we could have been before life happened. I had a strategy from very young that I had to be the funniest, coolest guy there in the room. That was my strategy. I had to be the most popular guy in the room, right? And that worked great until I got to about 25 and then realized, what? There is no substance to this and it's tiring. And so I needed a better strategy. And so I went from trying to be the most interesting man in the room to trying to be the most interested man in the room. And that's been a much better strategy for me because that creates connection rather than when I have to be the most interesting, it shuts everyone else down. When I'm the most interested, it opens everyone up.
Makes sense.
And so that's that's an example of an old strategy I had that was successful, but doesn't work anymore.
Okay. What do you deem as a healthy man?
Well, that's a good question. I deem as a healthy man. I have this theory of 4 C's, right? I think there's 4 C's that we need to thrive. And I think they're connection, challenge, contribution, celebration, right? So when I'm taking time to connect with myself, challenge myself, contribute to myself, and contribute to and celebrate myself, that starts me being a healthy man, right? I think it extends out of that from a journey from self through family to community to planet. So I think a successful, a healthy man is a man who is connected to himself, his family, his communities and the planet, challenges himself, challenges his family, challenges his community, challenges the planet, the world in a healthy way, contributes to himself, family, community, world, and celebrates himself, his family, his community, the world. So it's quite a long-winded way of just saying that I think a healthy man is a man who takes care of himself, but knows he isn't the center of the universe and acts in service to those beyond him. So he uses all those great things we have. Being competitive isn't bad. Wanting to be competent isn't bad. Wanting to fix things isn't bad. Yeah, those things are great if we use them in service to others. And I think men thrive through service. I see it on the NWTAs, the New Warrior Trained Adventure. Sorry, we do love an acronym. Men coming together to support other men on a massive scale. 100 men on those weekends. And they work because everyone's happy working on something together, serving something bigger than self. And we take something from that and we give something. And that's where I think we become healthy in our communities and for the world, is when we're taking what we need, but we give what we can. We are not the center of the universe.
So there's a couple of things there. I know from my own personal perspective, But connection from a men's perspectives, from my own perspective, being a man, it's quite difficult because you get told as a child that you've got to man up, you've got to do this by yourself, you've got to prove yourself. So that idea of connection, especially with other men, is quite a hard thing. It has been quite a hard thing to incorporate.
Yeah.
How would you suggest that we can start to embrace connection more as a man?
That's why I think men's groups are so good. I think men's groups are the key to a lot of this, really, because we're a pack animal, I believe. Men are a pack animal. And we see that in when groups of men get together, it be that a friend group or colleagues at work or a gang, whatever group of men get together. It's very easy for us to encourage ourselves to do bad things. Bad behavior can raise to the top really easily by increment, because what one person does makes it possible for the other person to do it, gives permission. That works the other way round, I think, when you get it healthy, when you get it in a men's group, where the more vulnerable I am, the more vulnerable you can be. The more connected to my emotions I am, the more connected you could be. That's why I think men's groups somehow, this is my personal belief, right? I think men's groups, or at least group work, was more effective for me than therapy, right? And because it's one person, someone saying to it was one thing for someone to say to me, connect with your emotions more, learn to be more vulnerable. It's very different when I see men around me modeling that. That makes it much more easy for me to connect with myself when I see other men connecting with themselves. It gives me a model to work on. It gives me a model of what that looks like. So I think connection, spend time with yourself, work out what your emotions mean. For a long period of my life, I thought that the only emotion I ever felt was anger. If I was sad, I experienced it as anger. If I was afraid, I experienced it as anger. So start doing some work on trying to understand what your emotions mean. Bit of time with self. Try to just be conscious about your decisions you're making rather than just lose yourself in distractions and work. If you have a family, take time to connect with them. Don't get caught up in the head. Get caught up in what's around you. Take the time to appreciate what you have. It's the first way to start connecting with self. And then find a group of men and start connecting with those regularly, and then take that then out further into other community. So yeah, in increment. But I think the magic bullet is a men's group. Was for me.
Nice. I imagine it'll be the same with women can connect with women's groups and yeah.
Yeah, I talk about men. When I talk about men, I'm sure most of what I'm talking about can apply to women in the same way, right? I just don't talk about it because, one, I don't know. I know a little bit, I think, about being a man because I am one, but I don't really know what your experience as a man is like compared to my experience of being a man. So I'm willing to take a good guess, best, at what it's like for other men. So that's why I talk specifically about men. And besides, I don't think a woman needs another man telling her what's good for her and how she should do it. There's plenty of other good women out there who can do that.
Somebody asked the other day, why is your podcast called Man Quest to Find Meaning? And it's because basically, being a man, I can relate more to men on a higher scale, on a higher way. I know when I was lost about 8 years ago, and at my lowest point, the one thing that I struggled with a lot was finding a purpose. I didn't even know what a purpose was. So for those men that don't know and want to know more, can you talk about purpose and how can they start to step into that purpose, that they make the service?
Yeah, purpose. Finding purpose, that's probably one of the biggest questions in our life, isn't it? It's like man's search for meaning. Like, why am I here? What's my purpose? What am I supposed to do? And so again, I think the best thing you can do in the short run is just make a best guess at what you think your purpose is. It's another one of the things where you could sit around doing nothing for ages trying to find your actual purpose. Right? And the simple flip that I recommend is I believe, and is shared by a lot of people, and it underpins one of the ideas of mission that we have in the Mankind Project, is that my purpose comes from my wound. So when people are like, oh, I don't know what I'm here for. Am I supposed to do this? Am I supposed to do that? I go, what have you overcome that you'd never want anyone to ever have to feel again? And that could just be as simple as loneliness, or I felt lost. All right. What you're doing here, you felt lost, right? That was your words, that you felt lost. You didn't know what your purpose was. And now you've got a podcast about man's search for meaning. So there's a classic example, right? You take the wound, look at the wound and go, what is it? And how did I overcome that? And how can I help the world solve that problem? If people are lost, they don't know what to do, or depressed, and they're like, I just don't know what to do. Find the biggest problem that you feel passionate about trying to solve and go out and try and solve it, right? Because it may not be your life purpose, but as soon as you get moving, you start getting closer ideas of what it may look like. And to solve a problem that's big like that, you're going to have to start working with other people. You're going to have success and failures. You're going to start building your self-esteem. It goes back to those 4 C's for me. Like if I'm trying to solve a massive problem like I am, so my problem is I want every man in the world to have access to simple, effective men's personal development, because I think that's the quickest way to change the world, is to get men in good shape. So am I ever going to do that in my lifetime? No, but that's what I'm aiming for. So to do that, I have to connect with other men and women. I have to connect with everyone. I have to be out there. So I get connection. I have to overcome challenges all the time, right? I get a sense that I'm contributing to something other than me, and you get victories along the way. So I celebrate. So that's the importance of finding your purpose, is it gets you to move. But the way I think to find your purpose is to look backwards and go, what did I have to overcome? Or what do I never want another person to experience again? Or what, when I look out at the world, do I think that just isn't right? I want to play a part in changing that, and then start doing it and make that your purpose.
Yeah, it's a journey. And you might have the 1% that might find it straight away. But from my own experience over the last 8 years, it's been trying something, then realizing it's not, trying something else, and then trying something else. And eventually you start to find out, and I don't even think you fully get to grasp your purpose because it's continually changing.
It's continually changing. And what I use as an example is there's 2 things in contradiction here. One is our meaning, our purpose is just where we give meaning, right? Because I personally don't believe there is some preordained thing that I was here to do. I find that, right? From my experience, I decide this is what I'm here to do. So it's wherever I put focus and meaning becomes my purpose. So that's one side of things. And the other side is, you think of someone like Stradivarius, right? Greatest violin player of all time, a violin maker of all time. Now, his dad was a violin maker, right? So was it his purpose? Was it his preordained mission in life to make the best violins that anyone's ever made? No, what happened is his dad said, start making violins. Help me with this. And he thought, oh, this is good. Oh man, this sounds great. Oh, hang on now. When I use a different wood, it's this sound. So he started putting his focus into just trying to make the best violins he could. And where we put our focus and turn up again and again, we start to get meaning from, because we start to get feedback from it. And then you will find that meaning becomes your purpose. One day you'll go, I know why I'm here. I'm here to make the greatest violins. And that could be the same. Say you was a drug addict, right? And you recover from that. And you come around, you think, I don't want anyone else to be a drug addict. So you start volunteering, you start doing stuff, you start getting feedback. You start thinking, man, actually, like this feels good. And actually, I'm getting a good response from this. So you get better at it and you keep doing it and you keep doing it. And one day you might go, bloody hell, that's what I was here to do all along. That wound back then is what's made me the man I am today, which has given me my life purpose, is to make sure that no woman, child or man will ever be a drug addict again, or will have tools to recover from addiction. So it's a to and fro. It's a call and response, like most things.
Yeah, like that. Obviously, with the MKP and quite a lot of other men's work, they mention about the 4 archetypes.
Yeah.
Can you briefly explain the 4 archetypes and how can men start to work with these to help them to step forward?
So I'll just clarify some stuff around the archetypes. They're often wrongly attributed to Carl Jung, right? And Carl Jung was one of a few who come up with this idea of archetypal energies. There's these characters that keep turning up in stories. So they must, if stories are how we understand the world, they must be a reflection of our subconscious. So he came up with this idea that there's these characters inside us, which we use to symbolize aspects of our inner personality. Right. And then it was 2 men, Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette. And they refined that from their work in men's personal development to come up with the 4 archetypes: the lover, the warrior, magician, king. And then people like Lawrence Tillman took that even further and came up with the idea of archetypal psychology or archetypal coaching. But the framework that is used within most men's organizations, especially the ones that have a mythopoetic background, that was the work of those men and other men around that, like Joseph Campbell, etc., Robert Bly. Anything that comes from the mythopoetic men's movement tends to have the lover, the warrior, the magician, king. And they can be simply thought of as the 4 elements of our life, really. The lover is our emotional part of our life. The warrior is the physical element of our life. The magician is the intellectual, and the king is the spiritual part of our life. And it can also be looked at as, if you then take that a little bit further, that the lover is the part of us that seeks connection with ourselves and with others. So it's the part that says, I feel. The warrior is the part that can set boundaries, defend boundaries, and extend boundaries by taking action in the world. So it's the part that takes action. It's the physical part. It's the part that says, I do or I won't do. It's about boundaries. The magician is Jung says we're the only animal that can see around corners. And I think that's what he's talking about. We can imagine, we can visit the past again to re-heal and find meaning. We can imagine what the future is going to look like, and we can learn and think and strategize and plan. So that's the magician. And the king is a really interesting one because it's the one that I think is often presented in the wrong way. The king is the spiritual aspect of ourselves because it deals with what can't be measured, can't be weighed, can't be touched. It's something that we know exists, but we can't see it. But what it is in its technical term, if you bring it down to its basic, and I like this because not being religious, it gives me a framework for spirit, for spirituality, spiritual aspect of my life, is the king is where decision lies. It's where vision lies. And that's because the king is able to hold a vision of something bigger and more important than self. So it's where service lives, really. It's the part of us that no matter what might feel good now, knows what to do for the greater good. I was just thinking there that while I went quiet, I was just thinking it's that there's that saying about men are at their best when we plant trees that we know we'll never eat the fruit from. That's the king part of us. That's the king part of us. This is the right thing to do. So because of that, it's where decision lays. And so if you think of those elements of our lives, the part of me that wants to feel, the part of me that wants to do, the part of me that wants to think, and the part of me that wants to serve, it's a pretty good framework for looking at all the elements of our lives. And it also becomes a good language. So if I say to you, my king is a little bit weak at the moment, I need to do some work on my king. You then know, without me having to say, he's not taking the action he wants to take, he's not setting the boundaries he wants to take, you'll get it. And so it's a really useful framework to work with. Some people have turned it into dogma. I see it where it's almost like a worship thing, almost become like a religion. But to me, it's just a simple framework so I can understand what's going on for me internally and have a shared language with you so you have half a chance of understanding what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's also the king, I suppose, sits at the top but it's almost like the leader.
Yeah.
But from a higher service, higher perspective.
Yeah. It's in some ways, it's the sort of the mature element of the other three. It sits there and says, yeah, I get that, because the lover part would want to just feel all day long. Yeah, just connect. We all know that person, right? Or we have times in our life when that is us. I just want connection. And then we have times where we just want to do. It doesn't matter. I don't even know if it's the right thing. I just want to do something, right? Or we get stuck in procrastination where we're just thinking, I need another plan. If I just buy emotion and just put everything in there, my life would be perfect. I need another journal, planning, but nothing happens. It's the king, because it can hold a vision bigger than self, because it can hold a vision. It says, I get all of that, but this is the right thing to do. Enough planning now, let's move. And so it holds all those elements. It governs those elements.
Just sticking to the archetypes a little bit, there's the idea that the men of today, a lot of them are still in boyhood. How can we navigate going from boyhood to manhood in a healthy way?
I'd like to reframe it a little bit, really.
Okay.
I think boyhood and manhood, I get it, but we all end up men regardless, right? We just don't get into a sort of mature masculinity that we could. So we remain in a sort of boyish version of masculinity. And so did you ask about the difference of those or the transition from those?
If you think of the boyish masculinity, how can us as men navigate into proper masculinity, into healthy masculinity, shall I say?
Yeah, so initiation is the way. And I don't mean you have to go and find an initiation process. They're great if you can, right? Really good. It's really helpful. But life initiates you anyway, right? Life initiates you anyway. If you've had a company like I did and it goes bankrupt and you lose everything and suddenly you've got bailiffs at your door, you're being initiated into better money management one way or another, right? And a divorce can be an initiation. Being cheated on can be an initiation. It's anything that makes you give one thing up and pick something else. The main thing, I think, is if you study initiation, what initiation rituals from all around the world, they seem to have a few very similar aspects. And one is they take the boy and they tell him, you are not the center of the universe. You are just a member of this community, and the community comes before you. So the community is more important than you. And then there's a sort of giving back of individuality where they say, but you have a unique and special place in this community. So if you think of a boyish idea of masculinity, we're the center of the universe and everything is there for our pleasure. So I should have this, I should have that, I should have. Healthy masculinity says, I'm here to make the community thrive. And this is the way I can bring my tools. And I get respect by being pillar of the community or respected by others or being in service to others, rather than I've got to show you that I'm the best, fastest, strongest, best looking, coolest. So the main thing is we have to get out of our own way and stop believing that we're the center of the universe and that we're just a part of a bigger community and world and that we have something special to bring. And that's what I think good initiatory processes do. And whether that be a retreat or whether that be just doing the work for long enough, and I think that's it's a key moment in doing the work, I think, where we start and we're learning all these tools because I want to be better. I want to feel better. I want to be better. And then there comes a part where we go, actually, I want to contribute to something bigger than self. I think that's a key moment. I want to be useful. For me, that's the transition from boy to man.
Yeah, it's like navigating day-to-day challenges and overcoming them, building a business, getting better in relationships, like you said, money, finding a satisfying job, that kind of thing.
they're all initiations one way or another, because you're going to have to give something up to get something new. And that's the key part. That's the key part. When they do initiations, tribal initiations, he's got to give up his childish ways to get responsibility and pride and safety. And he has to risk something. So that's the other important part of initiation, is we might have to risk something to get what we want in life. So here's a really good example. Yeah, say getting what you want in life in any area. The boy will just be like, I should have that. I want it. I should have it. But there's going to be a moment where he realizes, if I want that, if I want to look really fit, I'm going to have to give up eating junk food, going out drinking all the time and not exercising, right? I'm going to have to pick up exercising, taking care of myself and staying in once in a while, right? So I've got to put something down to pick something up. And the risk is it still may not work. So we have to, in all of those, in everything we do, we have to take a risk that to get what we want, we're going to have to give something, and as part of us must die. And that's the transition from boy to man, one way or another. Whether it can just be, I'm going to risk being ridiculed. Don't have to be life or death, but there's always a risk.
Just to finish off, is there anything else that you want to talk about? Is there anything, like any topics or anything that I might have missed?
I think the only thing that we maybe didn't touch upon is the sort of the importance of responsibility in all of this. Because if a man is starting out on this journey, I think almost the most important first step is to take complete responsibility. I'm responsible for where I am. Everything I have in my life is the sum total of decisions or strategies. That's not completely true. When people say that, that's largely true, I say. But if you're walking down the road someday and some guy just came and cut your leg off because he's a psychopath, you didn't manifest that in some way. You're the victim of someone else's psychology there. That does happen. But I'm responsible for how I deal with it. And I'm responsible for how I react, and I'm responsible for how I rebuild my life after that. So taking responsibility, I think, is the key. And I like to frame it this way, that any decision I make, I'll take full responsibility for the consequences of that. And I'll take full responsibility for making it right. And I think if you start this men's personal development journey with that in your mind, you can't go far wrong. So if you've had dysfunctional things before, work on the part of you that caused that, take responsibility, clean it up as much as you can. Because we've all made bad mistakes and we will continue making them. But being responsible for ourselves and for our loved ones and for building better communities and for helping the world to thrive is, you can take everything else away, really. As long as we're showing up trying to do that, you're going to get somewhere.
Yeah. It reminds me of 8 years ago when I first started this journey, that I wasn't going to be, so I took responsibility for not going back to how I was when I was at my lowest.
Yeah.
And changing my life.
So there you go. There's a perfect example there. You decided to take the responsibility. I'm responsible for that and I'm never going to go back there. And in doing that, what did you have to give up?
I suppose in that moment, I think I gave up the idea of being a victim.
Yeah. So you gave up the idea of being, so in that moment, so look at how powerful that is as a moment, right? You're there. First step was taking responsibility. This is my fault one way or another. And even if it's not my fault, it's still my responsibility to make it go. So I'm making a commitment to myself. I will never go back to there again. So in doing that, you picked up, you put down being a victim because you've taken responsibility for it. Right? So put down being a victim. So if you put down being a victim, what do you have to pick up? What did you have to pick up about yourself? What was the belief?
I'm worthy, that I am good enough, regardless of what's happened in the past. I've made some mistakes in a relationship and it's ended because of it. And now I'm going to, how can I start to own them mistakes?
And so when you believe that you're a victim, when you're holding the belief that you're a victim, What kind of strategies did you put in place?
Terrible ones. I was always walking around like a zombie. I hated myself, hated my job, what I was doing. Yeah, all them kinds of different things.
Great. And so as soon as you said, actually, I'm worthy, I'm good enough for all of this, what strategies did you start putting in place then?
I looked at ways and means and how to change my life.
Yeah.
Whether that was going and getting some healing, some Reiki healing, or starting to do Reiki myself, eventually it led to the Mankind Project. But along the lines, it's done other things like Psyche and all different kinds of stuff.
Yeah. And so one strategy closed you down and one strategy opened you up.
Yeah.
So it didn't necessarily give you all the answers, but you see how it starts with responsibility. I take responsibility. So if I take responsibility, it means I'm not that and I am that. And if I am that, then the strategies must be this. And so suddenly we're moving forward in our lives. So for anyone I don't know how long a man's journey they are when they might find this video of you and I, but if you're listening at home and this is it, you've hit rock bottom and you're desperately trying to find something and you're lucky enough to come across this podcast here, what I want you to know is that it just starts with you taking responsibility in the moment of just going, my life is mine. It's mine. And no matter what's gone before, I can't control that. I can take responsibility for trying to heal it. I can take responsibility for trying to clean up any mess that I've made. But I certainly take responsibility for my life improving from here on in. And I don't know what that looks like. But in that moment, what you're talking about from coming from victim to believing I'm enough, what is actually happening is you're turning your life from fate, something that happens to you, into destiny, something you create. So that moment of responsibility is the difference between fate and destiny. And that's a pretty big thing. That's a pretty big jump. And it starts with responsibility. So that's the note I want to end on, is all of this starts with responsibility.
Yeah, thank you.
And that's a scary thing.
So for the people who want to know more, can you tell us what exactly that you do and how to get in contact?
Sure. So if you want to find out more about the Mankind Project, you can go to the website there, mankindprojectuki.co.org. Sorry, let me say that again. mankindprojectuki.org. If you want to find anything about the NWTAs and anything there, drop an email there. It usually finds its way to me. Or if you want to hear more about the stuff that I have to say about simplifying, demystifying men's personal development, I'm Lawrence H. Johns across all socials. So it's easy to find me.
Thank you very much.
Great. See you soon. Stay in contact. Anything I can do to help the podcast, please let me know.
Yeah, perfect.